He's been working his ass off every day. Really good dude. I'm happy to have him here.
You talked about wanting to see maybe some tighter coverage on that third down or whatever it was. Did you guys just want to play all zone soft all day, or was that not soft, but?
No, I think some of that is situational awareness. You know, you want to be tighter on guys, especially on the third downs. You know, you can't give them that space that we gave them on a couple reps the other night. But part of that is some young guys and getting that right over the course of the game and correcting those things when you come back in. And that's where we're at in camp right now, you know.
That is the Jacksonville Jags defensive coordinator speaking about where things stand with the defense right now for the Jags at this point in the preseason after dropping that preseason opener. Well, thanks for joining us this morning and this afternoon here on Fox 35 News Plus. We'll be back at 2 o'clock with more Florida Live and another live hour of Fox 35 News Plus coming up at 4 p.m. 11 a.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. weekdays, live hours here on Fox Local and also other times as news warrants. So we are your spot for breaking news and other developing stories throughout the day here on Fox Local. As we wrap up here, I do want to go ahead and leave you with some tracking tools as we watch Tropical Storm Erin off the coast of Africa in the eastern tropical Atlantic. You can also see that Saharan dust that Brooks was talking about that is having an impact on that. So thanks for joining us. We will see you in a little bit. Keep it here on Fox Local.
Florida Live starts now.
Well, good afternoon to you and welcome into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. I want to let you know some of what we have for you coming up in this next hour, and I also want to give you a live look from our Launch Credit Union camera along Florida Space Coast, where we are tonight expecting a launch of a ULA Vulcan rocket carrying a national security payload. That launch scheduled for 7:59, although there is a 1 hour window that could go 7:59 to 8:59 from Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So again, that launch scheduled for later tonight. Big news in Florida politics today as State Senator Jay Collins was appointed as Florida's new lieutenant governor. That was a vacancy that had been open for several months now. Governor DeSantis making that appointment today. Collins being sworn in as lieutenant governor. We will have more coverage on that coming up in our Tampa connection and also in our Playbook Tuesday segment as we talk with Politico Florida about the ramifications of this, what it means for the 2026 governor's race, and a number of other things as well. In our Tampa connection, the family of a missing man found dead over the weekend is now asking for the FBI to get involved in the investigation. We'll talk with Nancy about that coming up in just a little bit. But our top story today, and where we're beginning our show here on the Florida Live today, is a man believed to be a cartel drug mule was sentenced in federal court today after a high-profile incident that involved his wife being kidnapped in broad daylight and eventually killed. This incident happened in Winter Springs, and again, this was in connection with a drug cartel and involvement with that. Today, the husband of that woman who was killed was sentenced to 84 months in federal prison. That's 7 years in prison plus 2 years of probation. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering in his role as a suspected mule for that drug cartel that was involved with this case. This afternoon, I spoke with Fox 35's Marie Ettinger, who was inside that federal courtroom for today's sentencing hearing.
This was a sentencing hearing for Miguel Aguas-Vivas Lizardo. He was accused and pleaded guilty to money laundering for this whole conspiracy involving a drug cartel that resulted in a kidnapping in broad daylight and then murder of his wife. So just to be clear, because this whole case has been extremely complicated, he's not involved in the actual murder. He was involved in recruiting his wife to essentially serve as a mule. His defense attorney said today he was supposed to be transporting money. He couldn't do it for whatever reason that day. And so he sent his estranged wife, actually Katherine Aguasvivas, instead. She was transporting, I believe, around $170,000 and called him actually to say as she was driving with that money that she was starting to get concerned, that she was fearful. She wound up in broad daylight being kidnapped and then later killed. Her car was set on fire. And this whole case actually involved several different people who the DEA and FBI had been tracking for years. Miguel Aguas-Vivas himself had been caught multiple times by the DEA, never convicted, and never actually faced any major charges up until this point, because the DEA and separately the FBI were all building cases about this Colombian cartel. A judge sentenced him to 84 months in prison plus 2 years probation. He also has to forfeit about a little over $1 million that was associated with this drug laundering operation that he says he was involved in.
And he spoke in court today.
He did. He made a couple emotional pleas to the judge. One was to accept responsibility and say that he is very, very sorry for what he says the mistakes that he's made and for the harm that he's done. He asked his family for their forgiveness, asked the judge for his leniency, essentially. His other main point, and a thing that came up a lot, was that Miguel Aguas-Vivas has 5 children in total. One of them has been born, it's an infant, was born while he's been in jail awaiting the sentencing hearing. And one of them, a 7-year-old girl, was the daughter that he shared with Katherine Aguasvivas, his wife, who was killed in this case. His family members also had written to the judge, making these exact same appeals, saying that he has kind of repented and bringing up his children, that he is very involved in their lives. His parents, so the girl's grandmother and grandfather, are now watching her. And he told the judge that he wants to be involved in their lives and that having a long sentence would pull him out of that, and that they would have undue consequences for them and really impact his children negatively, and they'd grow up worse off than if he'd been there. The judge essentially said, that's your fault. The judge said you should have thought about that before you joined a drug cartel, and that it's not the sentence's fault and it's not the judge's fault for imposing the sentence, but rather his fault for having committed these crimes in the first place. And that if he's going to take ownership of those crimes, he needs to take ownership of the sentence. His defense attorney had argued that 41 months was the average for federal cases like this, involving essentially drug mules. But he was charged and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. And so the judge was given a sentencing guideline of 81 to 87 months. He doesn't have to fit that. It's just a guideline. And so the defense attorney was asking for a lower sentence than that. But the judge said, no, this wasn't an aberration. It wasn't one mistake that you made. You'd had run-ins with the DEA before, so you had to have known that they were after you, or that they were at least tracking you in some way. And you continued to do this even after you were caught. And so the judge essentially said 7 years is appropriate for a sentence of this, or for a crime of this nature.
And do we expect the defense to appeal this?
We do. I actually asked the defense attorney that today. He says that he is expecting to be the attorney handling that appeal. They only have 14 days to file, but he says he'll be doing that, and he plans to make essentially the same arguments that he made in court today. The big argument, other than the impact on the family and the acceptance of responsibility that this defense attorney is making, is that he says he believes the judge is finding some sort of guilt or holding Miguel Aguas-Vivas culpable in some way for his wife's murder, when really he says that he was not involved in the planning or the execution of that. In fact, had he been able to drive the money that day, then he would have been the one who was killed, according to his defense attorney. So the attorney is hoping on the appeal to win the appellate judge over for that point, that having an 84-month-long sentence for essentially serving as a mule is a bit strict, and it seems like he's being held culpable for that murder.
And the judge said today that it is likely that he is deported?
Yes, so he's from the Dominican Republic originally, and it seems he was not here legally. So this defense attorney also brought up that if he is deported and has a felony sentence on his record, he would have some real trouble getting back in. If he does get his citizenship somehow, even with that conviction in the U.S., he would have his rights stripped either way, as in he would not be able to vote even if he became a citizen.
That's Fox 35's Marie Ettinger, who was inside the federal courtroom for that sentencing hearing earlier today. We're going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we still have a lot to get to over this next hour, so keep it here on Fox Local and on YouTube, and we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon, live on Fox Local and on YouTube. It is time now for our Tampa Connection, and for that we go to Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay. And Nancy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Garrett. Thanks for having me. Today we're going to start right here in Tampa, where early this morning Governor Ron DeSantis was here to announce our new Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins. Now, during this morning's press conference, DeSantis called Collins the Chuck Norris of Florida politics. Now, Jay Collins is taking the position after Jeanette Nunez was tapped to become the president of FIU earlier this year. Collins was elected to the Florida Senate in 2022 and represented District 14, which includes western portions of Hillsborough County. Now, before holding public office, Collins served in the United States Army from 1995 until 2018. He was deployed overseas several times as a Green Beret. Now, after suffering chronic injuries during combat, Collins had his leg amputated. However, he continued to serve 5 more years as a Green Beret and earned a Purple Heart. While in the Army, he earned a bachelor's degree as well as a master's. Now, earlier this year, Collins made headlines when he filed Senate Bill 918, which would have allowed teenagers to work more than 30 hours a week. It also would have allowed 14 and 15-year-olds who graduated from high school, earned a GED, are homeschooled, or who attend a virtual school to work longer hours. However, the bill did not make it to the full Senate floor. In June, Collins was a key player in organizing rescue flights for Americans to come home from Israel as the overseas conflict with Iran escalated. Now, today, Collins said that regardless of where you may fall on the political spectrum, he has your back. He added that while the battlefield may change, the mission stays the same, and he's vowed to protect everything that matters. Garrett?
Yeah, certainly big news there from Jay Collins. You talked about his history, some of the things that he has done. Going to be interesting to see now what this means for the governor's race in 2026, and that's something we'll talk about in a few minutes with our friends at Politico as well. So, but big developments for a seat that had been sitting empty for a while now. Story number 2 here, yes. Nancy. And this is an interesting one out of Polk County, where we got some details about a number of arrests from an incident that happened over the weekend.
Yes, that's right. There was a fight on this place called The Point in Lake Winterset. Now, The Point is a place where it's private property, but a lot of boats tend to pull up on the point. And over the weekend, there was viral video of a fight. And in that fight, one person was actually knocked unconscious. Another person was knocked into the water. Now, Grady Judd, he is the sheriff of Polk County. He said that 8 people were arrested in connection with the incident over the weekend. And he has said that the Polk County Sheriff's Office Marine Unit will be out in full force this weekend, and he says that they will be arresting people for conduct or activity that in the past that they used to just get a warning for. He said those arrests will be taking place from now on, but he does expect people to be arrested this weekend. Now, during a press conference this morning, Judd said that his office gets calls every weekend about rowdy and raunchy behavior taking place on that point area. He did say that anybody who is planning on going out on the lake this weekend and planning to cause a ruckus or who plans on maybe getting a little too rowdy, he advises them to bring bail money with them because they will be arrested. Now, there is a loophole at the point that allows anybody whose feet are in the water to be there. However, once you get on land, there are no trespassing signs and you're not allowed to be there. Now, there is also a plan in the works to make the area around the point a designated swim zone, and that will prevent boats from pulling up to it. Now, Judd said that the Polk County Commission did approve the swim zone, but it still needs approval from the state as well as the FWC before that actually becomes an ordinance. Garrett?
Interesting to hear the sheriff talk about some of those activities and show some interesting pictures as well during that news conference of things that are going on out there.
Yes, he definitely showed some interesting pictures as well as video. And the people who live in that area, that video and those photos are why they're getting so upset, because they're saying this activity is happening on their property and sometimes in front of children, and they want it to stop.
Yeah, you can't blame them for being frustrated in that case. Story number 3, and this new developments from the family members of this missing teenager who was found dead over the weekend.
Yes, that's right. The family of Giovany Pelletier, they want federal investigators to take over the case because they say local law enforcement has failed to treat the case with urgency. Now, Pelletier's mother shared a change.org petition on social media, and in it, the teen's family is asking for others to join them in demanding FBI involvement and a full, transparent investigation. Now, we've been talking about this case since August 1st. That's when Pelletier disappeared after he got into a car with his cousin, whom he had never met in person before, as well as 2 of his cousin's friends around 1:30 in the morning. They were all headed to the east coast of Florida to meet up with other relatives, but they say about 25 minutes into their ride, Pelletier started acting erratically and they let him out of the car in Manatee County near I-75 and State Road 70. His cell phone and a backpack were found in the area, and a body was found in a retention pond nearby. Now, Pelletier's family, as well as investigators, they do believe that body belongs to Pelletier. However, the medical examiner has not officially determined that it is Pelletier's body. They said that's due to decomposition. Now, Pelletier's mother says shortly before he vanished, her son texted her, "Help me," and he also sent similar text messages to other relatives before he disappeared. Now, she says nothing in this case is adding up, and according to that change.org petition, the family suspects gang activity may be at play. Now, Charlotte County is taking the lead on this investigation, and a public information officer says that their agency cannot elaborate on their investigation, but called the case nothing short of earth-shattering for Giovany's family. The Manatee County Sheriff's Office also responded, saying it is treating this death investigation with utmost priority. A dedicated team of detectives and support personnel is using every available tool and resource to determine the events that led up to the discovery of the body on Friday. Now, as I mentioned, the body that was discovered on Friday in that retention pond has yet to be officially identified by the medical examiner as Pelletier. However, his family as well as detectives do believe it is him. But the medical examiner also said that an autopsy showed no signs of trauma or foul play. Now, we were told that earlier this morning there were a bunch of law enforcement officers surrounding that retention pond where the body was found on Friday, and we will have much more details coming up later. Garrett?
All right. It's one of those cases that has been getting a lot of attention, even seen it kind of picked up nationally. So it's interesting to kind of watch developments with that. Nancy, story number 4, and that's some neighbors in a St. Pete neighborhood having worries about flooding.
Yes, that's right. So we had rain over the weekend, and neighbors in the Distant Heights neighborhood said that the flooding in their neighborhood wasn't this bad unless it was the hurricanes that we had last year. And they are actually blaming a nearby construction project for the flooding that took place over the weekend. Neighbors said the water reached their front doors and garages, and one of the garages actually flooded. Now, they are blaming the construction of an affordable housing project at Palm Lake Christian Church that broke ground about a month ago. One resident told us that the flow of water with the runoff from dirt and everything else from the project is clogging up the drains. He said that they told City Council this was an issue about 2 years ago. He said the water is so muddy coming from the project that when it hits the streets and goes into the storm drains, there's no place for the sand to go, so it piles up, and the next thing you know, the streets are flooded. And they went on to say that people have lived in these homes for a very long time, and now they are faced with their houses flooding just for a common thunderstorm. The city's public works team visited the site to make sure the developer, New Star Development, was in compliance. And a city spokesperson told us that developers are required to follow certain guidelines when constructing new properties, including having sediment barriers installed to prevent runoff. St. Pete's chief building inspector and deputy building official were also on site yesterday, and they said that they will follow up with their findings. Neighbors said if the project can't be stopped altogether, they do want the developer to be held accountable. Now, in a statement, the church said, "We've begun our investigation and have made some extra mitigation to ensure that things move smoother." New Star Development LLC president Brian event said his firm is partnering with Palm Lake Christian Church and the Pinellas County Housing Authority to develop the Palm Lake Urban Sanctuary attainable housing community that is adjacent to the church. Now, in a statement, he said, I discussed the drainage concerns with our civil engineer and general contractor, and I also visited our development site today to survey the current drainage systems. We also had City of St. Pete inspectors on site today. Per our engineer, the current drainage system is compliant with SwiftMud and City of St. Pete drainage requirements, and we will continue to monitor for compliance and complete the system as designed and approved/permitted. We value our partnership with the City of St. Pete, and we appreciate the city's support for the Palm Lake Urban Sanctuary development. We welcome the increased frequency for inspections, and we will make sure our design and construction teams continue to work closely with city staff to ensure full compliance with all permits and city code requirements. Now, a city spokesman also said Sunday night storms produced short-term bursts of very heavy rain, leading to a flash flood warning by the National Weather Service. Rain gauges in the area reported bursts of rain coming down at rates of about 1 inch every 15 minutes.
Wow.
So while this was a thunderstorm and not necessarily a hurricane or a tropical storm or even a tropical depression, it did produce a lot of rain over the weekend, leading to that flooding.
Yeah, certainly concerning for those folks who live there. Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay, we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. This was the scene in Tampa earlier today as State Senator Jay Collins was sworn in as the state's lieutenant governor after Governor Ron DeSantis appointing him to that position following a vacancy of several months left when Jeanette Nunez left that post to take the president's role with FIU. Joining us live now to talk about this and other political topics this afternoon is Gary Fineout, a reporter with Politico. And Gary, always good talking with you. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me here in, wonderful, hot, humid Tallahassee in the middle of summer. So
you make it sound so appealing. Gary, the announcement today certainly comes as no surprise. This was the name I know that you had been hearing for a while now as the likely replacement and the likely person to fill this role.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that Jay Collins always expressed an eagerness and a desire for this job. Which the thing about being lieutenant governor is it doesn't really have any defined responsibilities under Florida law. I mean, the main thing is, of course, you take over in case something happens to the governor. And the governor today mentioned that was one of the qualities he looked at in terms of determining who he was going to pick. But it is because of the fact that the job doesn't have a lot of defined responsibilities, isn't necessarily, it's as high profile as the governor decides to make it. And so Collins has been a very reliable ally and has, basically said, well, whatever the governor wants me to do, if he asks me, I'm willing to do it. And so he was there. He's willing. He's got, obviously, he has a very good, very interesting resume. He is Green Beret, and he was a veteran, and he lost his leg while he was serving in the military, and then he's been involved in charitable efforts, and then recently he was involved in efforts to get people out of Israel during the conflict between Israel and Iran. So, yeah, that's he is very much someone who has been there from the get-go for the governor.
What do you think this means, if anything, for the 2026 governor's race? We know there had been a lot of eyes on who the governor might tap for this role with that in mind, because he has not endorsed Byron Donalds. Does this mean anything? Should we take anything from this?
I think potentially it means something. I mean, one of the other things that Collins has said in the last couple of months is that he has not ruled out running for governor. Now, let's understand, Byron Donalds has the endorsement of President Trump. He's been out there raising money. He's been out there getting endorsements. So he basically, Donalds is easily the front runner right now. But as you point out, DeSantis hasn't endorsed Donalds. He has made some comments suggesting that he wants a certain type of person to follow him as Florida's governor. And so this does put Collins in a potential position to run for governor at some point. I mean, I think the issue is, Donalds jumped into the race pretty much ahead of a lot of people. And you've been wondering whether or not he was going to make it all the way to qualify next June without drawing, some sort of well-known Republican opponent. And that remains the question, but there are now starting to be signs that, yes, Donalds is going to have to worry about a primary.
To the, when we're talking about the 2026 governor's race, you also had an interesting conversation with John Morgan. And I'm curious if you could share some about that and kind of how that fits into this conversation about 2026.
Well, John Morgan is the ultimate wild card. I mean, the thing is, of course, as he himself has acknowledged, he's a billionaire. And if he chose to run for governor, he would come from a point of he is enormously wealthy, could put his own money into the effort, as he already has. I mean, let's not forget, John Morgan, while everybody mostly knows him as the face of Morgan & Morgan, the ubiquitous law firm that is everywhere, he helped get the minimum wage ordinance, minimum wage raised in Florida. He helped get medical marijuana passed in Florida, and he spent millions of his own money to accomplish that. And so now we look at somebody who has name recognition, has his wealth. Now, what he interestingly enough says is he keeps saying, if I ran, I would not run with either banner of either party, which there's some technical legal issues that could be there. But then when you talk to him, you can't get an answer that suggests that he really is going to run for governor. I mean, he keeps talking about how he's thought about it. People have asked him. But then he also says, he's satisfied with where he is in his life. And so it is something to watch. I mean, look, the thing about it is that because of who he is, he's the kind of person who could jump in the governor's race very, very late. But, for right now, he just, kind of sort of hedges his bets.
Let's also talk about redistricting. I know that is a big topic of conversation across the country. It has become a topic of conversation here in Florida as well, especially with the announcement from the House Speaker that he's creating a committee to look at this very issue.
Yes. I mean, that there had been a bit of silence for a couple of weeks from the Florida legislature. I mean, Governor DeSantis had talked about the need to do a mid-decade redistricting, and then we saw, of course, what's happened in Texas, and they're trying to get seats there that they're carved out for Republicans. And the governor has been saying for a couple of weeks now, this is something we should think about doing and that we're working on it. Then you had the speaker, Danny Perez, come out last week and said, well, I'm setting up a special committee to start working on it this fall. And so the governor was asked about it earlier this week. He basically said, well, I had nothing to do with Perez's announcement. Okay, but still, it's interesting. So what I would say to you is that a lot of things in works. Now, without getting into all the redistricting weeds, because it can get very complicated, there are two big issues here. One issue is that a lot of people think that Florida should have gotten more seats through what's known as reapportionment during the last go round, which was where the results came in after the 2020 census. So you have that part of the element of it is like, should there be a new census? As we know, President Trump last week said he had directed the Commerce Secretary to begin work on a new census. Well, how quickly is that going to happen? Will there be lawsuits? Will they do it the way that Trump wants it? Trump says that he wants to do a new census where no one who entered the country illegally is counted. So you have all that going on. But meanwhile, you have people who are saying, looking at a recent Supreme Court ruling, state Supreme Court ruling, and suggesting, well, maybe there's room for Florida to sort of recarve a couple of South Florida seats and change it in reaction to that ruling. So I just need to keep in mind, if you were to do a whole new census, there's people thinking that Florida could gain anywhere from 3 to 5 new seats above and beyond the 28 congressional seats it has. And right now, Republicans have a 20-8 margin in Congress in Florida. And basically, DeSantis himself has said, look, those 4 seats that we picked up in the 2022 redistricting probably helped flip the Congress to the Republicans. So the question is, will the House go ahead and say, and the Senate, we still haven't heard what the Senate wants to do, but will the legislature this fall start to draw up new maps based on the previous census numbers, where they change the lines and it helps Republicans? Now, technically under the law, I say technically under the law, Florida legislature cannot draw seats specifically designed to help one party or the other. So you have to keep that in mind, that no matter what the legislature does, it'll likely end up in court. But it's just going to be a matter of how will they proceed? Will they say, no, let's wait to see if Trump gets a new census? So that's sort of the things that are at work.
You mentioned we still haven't heard from Senate President Ben Albritton. Should we read into that at all?
Not yet. I don't think not yet. I mean, okay. Yes, it is interesting that he has not commented. It's also worth noting that the Senate president has worked pretty well with Governor DeSantis. So it's just, basic, Tallahassee insider viewpoint would be, it would be somewhat unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely that the Senate president would say to the House and the governor, oh, I'm not going to do this. And plus, of course, we know this is being watched very closely from Washington, D.C. What we've not heard is whether or not the White House actually actively asked anyone in Florida to start this process.
Going to be interesting to watch, that's for sure. Politico reporter Gary Fineout, we appreciate you joining us and appreciate your insight on this Playbook Tuesday here on Florida Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Oh. Welcome back into Florida Live. Well, there just went our feed of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners meeting as they discussed and just approved moments ago advancing plans to increase the gas tax in Seminole County by 5 cents. This was something that was discussed. We heard from a number of several speakers, 3, I believe, public comment, and then a number of commissioners discussing this as well. I do want to play this for you. This happened they just wrapped up their discussion and the vote. But I do want to play for you some of that discussion among the commissioners as they discuss some of their reasoning for approving this. Let's go ahead and listen in. This is just moments ago in Seminole County.
Constitutional officers and our needs all wrapped up, and then allocated it back to the degree that we could to the appropriate users. So doing all 3 at once is the best way to make sure that property owners don't bear the entire burden of the need. And I think 2 commissioners have already said this, but we will look at this every year, and we look at spending every year. And I asked the question directly because there also is this misunderstanding, and I certainly, until I sat up here, had the misunderstanding that if we say grace over somebody's budget, constitutional officers all come into here, and it kind of appears as though we get to say no. And quite honestly, it may appear as though we get to say no, but a no can result in an appeal to the state by those, and it comes back mid-year with the request that we don't win and we can't fund. And now we're eating away the entire reserve. And that, if you eat away the entire reserve, and George knows this, that means that you're digging out of a bigger hole in the future, which means that the increase may not be this level. And I'm not willing to do that. In addition to the fact that I think that we in this community live in a very safe environment, and we appreciate that safe environment. And I would like to keep it that way. And it's no secret, the biggest ask in this budget is coming from our public safety, and I'm not willing to sacrifice public safety for a small tax on gas that is often paid by folks that do not live here, because we pay it when we travel, and impact to utility that bears less burden to our taxpayers that are paying property tax, and a property tax that actually will support public safety and keep our property values where they are or higher. That's my intention to vote.
And Mr. Chairman, since everybody else has said one more thing, I'll just say one thing.
Well, the chairman hadn't said a thing yet, but you go right ahead.
Then please do.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to repeat that just like the sales tax, and I think Commissioner Hurd just said it, just like the sales tax, this is going to be paid by about 30% of outside employees and our outside citizens. And, you know, there is an assumption also that the ad valorem has already been approved. The ad valorem hasn't been approved yet. We are all working, and including the staff, to do everything we can to continue to work through that and try to minimize the increase. So to say that this was done after we have already done it, as been said, has not happened yet. The ad valorem has not been approved yet.
So all good points, perspectives from my fellow commissioners, so I won't endeavor upon repeating that. But I'm going to just take you a different angle. It's been 30 years. The fuel efficiency in automobiles has increased by approximately 35% in the last 30 years. That means less fuel sold. That means less income, number one. Number two, with the advent of EVs, of which one of my fellow commissioners happens to own and enjoys driving them, that's great. That's less income through the gas tax because we're not buying fuel. Now, we can all argue those are great things for the environment, great things for society, but it does take an impact. A quick review of the statewide collections over the last 10 to 15 years, the gas tax collections have been reducing steadily across the board, not just this county, but the entire state as a whole. These are about times of getting back to drawing a direct nexus to the revenue stream to the expense stream, and that's what this will accomplish, number one. Number two, there were some statements made about spend down reserves. Mr. Creedon, we have spent down reserves since I arrived here at fighting tooth and nail with my fellow commissioners. They'll vouch for that because I'm very adamant and very vocal about that. Now we're down to a point where the reserves are in such a position that, not knowing what is going to happen with FEMA dollars flowing during a disaster, we may find ourselves in a pretty bad place. So reserves have been, at my insistence and a very good dialogue with my fellow commissioners, we're now back to where it should be, which is what the government accounting experts claim they should be, which is about, what, 3 to 4 months worth of overhead, Mr. Jacks? Is that where we're at?
2 months, about 17%.
Yeah. So we're in line there. When I arrived here, it was 26% was the reserves in this county, and not including the carry forwards, which was probably another 4 or 5%. So those have gone away under this commission's purview. So I would tell you to ask the question, which is more conservative? Waiting to the last minute to raise an increase, or raising it long before it's due and necessary? I would argue the conservative thing to do is when it's appropriate. So this county has been conservative not only with this option tax for near 30 plus years, but as well as the other taxes that Mr. Creedon was referring to during our regular budget. I would agree that we have some struggles in the budget as far as our constitutionals. They have different needs than what we have. Public service does come first, and like Commissioner Herr, I'm not willing to put public safety at risk for this county, our residents, my children, my grandchildren, for the future of what really is best for this community, and what this community has not only demanded, quite honestly deserve, the quality of life that they've enjoyed and will continue to enjoy as this moves forward. So with that said, I will call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
4-1 passes unanimously.
Unanimously, passes 4-1.
4-1, sorry. Supermajority.
4-1, that passed. Again, that was just moments ago. We're going to take a quick break here on Florida Live, but actually, you know what? Hold up on that because we don't need to take one right this second. And I do want to play for you a little bit of the public comment that we heard from some speakers as well who expressed their opposition to this ahead of that vote. Here is what they had to say and their arguments against it.
Mr. Sellery, Mr. Adams, and Mr. Creed. Okay, Mr. Adams, you beat them all there, so let's go.
Okay, good. My name is Wynn Adams. I live at 646 Fellowship Drive, Fern Park, Florida, 32730-2792. I'm also a former Seminole County Commissioner. My concern is when you read item number 25, it talks about that this will be effective for 50 years. And my question is, why don't we have some wording in there that say this issue could be revisited every 5 years to determine as to whether it's still needed or it has to go up. So that is my concern about this. 50 years instead of 5 years. Re-review and things of that nature. And it's also my understanding that some of this will be used for payment of our Sunrail obligation. And my concern about, of course, about Sunrail is what are we doing to increase ridership? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Next up, Mr. Sellery.
Good afternoon. George Sellery, 5231 Shoreline Circle, Sanford, 32771. Let's see if we can get this up on the screen. I don't know if we can get it any better than that. This is your slide from earlier. I just want to make mention that, you know, this brings in $5.5 million. The sales tax brings in over $55 million And that's a 10-year, so look, if it increases a little bit, 600 million county share, not including cities. So right now, Orange County and Volusia County have no sales tax. I just want to make sure everyone knows that for accurate comparisons, because they would have billions of dollars towards that, or hundreds of millions, depending on the split. In the bottom corner of the one there, Mr. Jex had pointed out the AAA slide in the comparison, if you want to flip to the next one. This is updated every single day on AAA's website. And really, if it shows you see Seminole, we're the red one right there, surrounded by white. I didn't put Brevard in because they're less than the white. But again, it's, I think, the way our county is situated and it's so small, that's kind of what we're stuck with. So right now, even the ones with a 5-cent increase are higher than us. So we're going to be, and again, today it's a little bit lower. I think Volusia's at $2.99 in today's. Okay, and then let's go to the last one. And what I want to talk about there was, again,
several public speakers speaking against the raising the gas tax in Seminole County. But again, you heard that vote just moments ago, 4-1 to approve that local gas tax hike. We're going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back after this. Welcome back into Florida Live, and here's a live look at the Kia Center, home of the Orlando Magic. Big announcement today from the Orlando Magic and the Miami Heat that they're opening the 2025 preseason not here in Florida, but in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Here is their announcement just a few minutes ago.
We're extremely grateful. I think today is a day of gratitude. I think we worked on this event for the last, it started like 3 years ago, but then a lot of people came into the picture. So I'm happy we're here 3 years after hard work. And it's just about gratitude and how we can, as a company in Puerto Rico, how we can elevate Puerto Rico as a gravitational center in the whole Americas to be a forthcoming force of sports, music, and entertainment, and partnership with many people. So I have to thank from Carlos Arroyo, Anuel AA, all the media in Puerto Rico who supported this, sponsors. It takes it's an uphill to get an uphill battle to get a lot of these things and large global events done. So we can just say that we're very grateful, along with our VRDG team who are all here, and everyone is always working very hard. So for us, it's an honor. We're going to have a blast October 4th in Puerto Rico. official announcement, Orlando Magic versus Miami Heat. I think we may see a lot of different little events that will be part of it. BRDG stands as well for, how can I explain this, not only that we put these global events, but that we also have a positive impact. What do we mean by that? And I think it's key, along with our media partners. I know Fernando's here, and Telemundo, Nuevo Dia, and all the different folks who made this happen. We really care about the community. No joke. If we do well, people next to us have to do well as well. So we're doing what's called a community clinics in the different little communities in Puerto Rico. We'll host press conferences. We'll do celebrity engagements. We'll also try to have certain activities that obviously enhance the profile of basketball youth in the sport. So I'm not going to bore you more, but thank you so much, and we're going to have a great time, God willing. And thank you for all the sponsors and everyone who made this happen, because it costs very much to do all this stuff.
We're excited. We have a rich history with Puerto Rico. We're excited to be back. We have great fans there. We're excited to continue that journey with our fans, and now and for the future. I'd like to thank Ryan DeVos and the Orlando Magic for participating in the NBA, for their help, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming out today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, JV. Also representing the Miami Heat here today is one of my favorite people. He's not just a former colleague, a former player, somebody I criticized for missing a shot here or there from time to time, but also celebrated him very much. He's a former NBA champion, 3-time NBA All-Star, 1995 NBA three-point champ, 1989 NCAA champion, 15-year veteran, and now Heat legend and ambassador, and a good friend. Please welcome Glenn Rice.
Thank you, Jose. You know, I tried not to miss too many shots, Jose. Actually, thank you. This is actually the closest I've been to Nick since we both were members of the Miami Heat and Orlando Magic, and when I scored 56 points against them. But we won't bring that up. Now, Nick's a really good friend of mine. It's always good to see him, and I enjoy what he brings to the game, and especially in his ambassador role. The players, they're going to get a great opportunity to play in front of some phenomenal fans in Puerto Rico. And I expect them to go out and do the best they can, and as an ambassador for the game, it's a great opportunity for me to once again speak on the game and do for the game, and get an opportunity to go out and work in the communities and do what we do best. When you talk about the Miami Heat, and I'm pretty sure Orlando Magic feels the same way, one of the things we try and do is do what we can in the communities, not just on the basketball court, but in the communities, to make sure we're doing our part, and you can best believe we're going to give that 100%.
Well, first of all, thank you, Julio and JV, for having us, and to the entire Heat organization for this opportunity to play and compete down in an amazing market in Puerto Rico. We are incredibly excited to be down on the island, and we look at Puerto Rico as a continuation of Florida that we're really excited to bring the game and be a part of. We've been very active down in the Puerto Rican market over the last 7 years through our partners with Ana Jimenez University, as well as the Puerto Rican Tourism Company. We really value their relationships to be able to bring clinics to the youth down there and really just be able to show off the game, the NBA game, and ultimately the Orlando Magic to Puerto Rico. So incredibly excited for this opportunity, very appreciative for it. Looking forward to it, and we've been longtime rivals for quite some time, which has been fun. And I will say, Glenn, Nick brought it up pretty quickly. He remembers the 56. But it's amazing to be able to collaborate on something like this, be competitive on the court, but be able to collaborate in this community and be able to continue growing the game in unison. So great opportunity, and very appreciative to you all for coming out and being a part of this.
I would be remiss if I don't mention, me and Glenn has had battles, not just in the NBA world, but we go back to college. Him being a Michigan Wolverine, me, University of Illinois. So we clashed on several different occasions. And as much as it hurts me to say this, they beat us on the last second shot in the Final Four. So, we go back to that. But moving forward, as an organization, we're looking forward to playing in Puerto Rico against as Ryan mentioned, our rivals in the Miami Heat. I think it's going to be a great game, great opportunity, and for his community.
A lot of excitement surrounding that preseason game coming up in Puerto Rico. Again, just a few weeks away. Hard to believe we're already talking NBA preseason. 8 o'clock Eastern, Saturday, October 4th. That is when the Magic and the Heat will tip off the preseason in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The first NBA exhibition game in Puerto Rico since 2006 when the Heat played the Pistons. They are also working to bring some youth basketball clinics to the island and some other resources to help out those communities as well. Well, thanks for joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live. We are here weekdays at 2 o'clock.
Florida Live starts now.
Well, good afternoon to you and welcome into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. I want to let you know some of what we have for you coming up in this next hour, and I also want to give you a live look from our Launch Credit Union camera along Florida's Space Coast, where we are tonight expecting a launch of a ULA Vulcan rocket carrying a national security payload. That launch scheduled for 7:59, although there is a 1 hour window that could go 7:59 to 8:59 from Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So again, that launch scheduled for later tonight. Big news in Florida politics today as State Senator Jay Collins was appointed as Florida's new lieutenant governor. That was a vacancy that had been open for several months now. Governor DeSantis making that appointment today. Collins being sworn in as lieutenant governor. We will have more coverage on that coming up in our Tampa connection and also in our Playbook Tuesday segment as we talk with Politico Florida about the ramifications of this, what it means for the 2026 governor's race, and a number of other things as well. In our Tampa connection, the family of a missing man found dead over the weekend is now asking for the FBI to get involved in the investigation. We'll talk with Nancy about that coming up in just a little bit. But our top story today, and where we're beginning our show here on Florida Live today, is a man believed to be a cartel drug mule was sentenced in federal court today after a high-profile incident that involved his wife being kidnapped in broad daylight and eventually killed. This incident happened in Winter Springs, and again, this was in connection with a drug cartel and involvement with that. Today, the husband of that woman who was killed was sentenced to 84 months in federal prison. That's 7 years in prison plus 2 years of probation. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering in his role as a suspected mule for that drug cartel that was involved with this case. This afternoon, I spoke with Fox 35's Marie Ettinger, who was inside that federal courtroom for today's sentencing hearing.
This was a sentencing hearing for Miguel Aguas-Vivas. He was accused and pleaded guilty to money laundering for this whole conspiracy involving a drug cartel that resulted in a kidnapping in broad daylight and then murder of his wife. So just to be clear, because this whole case has been extremely complicated, he's not involved in the actual murder. He was involved in recruiting his wife to essentially serve as a mule. His defense attorney said today he was supposed to be transporting money. He couldn't do it for whatever reason that day. And so he sent his estranged wife, actually, Katherine Aguasvivas, instead. She was transporting, I believe, around $170,000 and called him actually to say as she was driving with that money that she was starting to get concerned, that she was fearful. She wound up in broad daylight being kidnapped and then later killed. Her car was set on fire. And this whole case actually involved several different people who the DEA and FBI had been tracking for years. Miguel Aguas-Vivas himself had been caught multiple times by the DEA, never convicted, and never actually faced any major charges up until this point, because the DEA and separately the FBI were all building cases about this Colombian cartel. A judge sentenced him to 84 months in prison plus 2 years probation. He also has to forfeit about a little over $1 million that was associated with this drug laundering operation that he says he was involved in.
And he spoke in court today.
He did. He made a couple emotional pleas to the judge. One was to accept responsibility and say that he is very, very sorry for what he says the mistakes that he's made and for the harm that he's done. He asked his family for their forgiveness, asked the judge for his leniency, essentially. His other main point, and a thing that came up a lot, was that Miguel Aguas-Vivas has 5 children in total. One of them has been born, it's an infant, was born while he's been in jail awaiting the sentencing hearing. And one of them, a 7-year-old girl, was the daughter that he shared with Katherine Aguasvivas, his wife, who was killed in this case. His family members also had written to the judge, making these exact same appeals, saying that he has kind of repented and bringing up his children, that he is very involved in their lives. His parents, so the girl's grandmother and grandfather, are now watching her. And he told the judge that he wants to be involved in their lives and that having a long sentence would pull him out of that, and that they would have undue consequences for them and really impact his children negatively, and they'd grow up worse off than if he'd been there. The judge essentially said, that's your fault. The judge said you should have thought about that before you joined a drug cartel, and that it's not the sentence's fault and it's not the judge's fault for imposing the sentence, but rather his fault for having committed these crimes in the first place, and that if he's going to take ownership of those crimes, he needs to take ownership of the sentence. His defense attorney had argued that 41 months was the average for federal cases like this involving essentially drug mules. But he was charged and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. And so the judge was given a sentencing guideline of 81 to 87 months. He doesn't have to fit that. It's just a guideline. And so the defense attorney was asking for a lower sentence than that. But the judge said, no, this wasn't an aberration. It wasn't one mistake that you made. You'd had run-ins with the DEA before, so you had to have known that they were after you, or that they were at least tracking you in some way. And you continued to do this even after you were caught. And so the judge essentially said 7 years is appropriate for a sentence of this, or for a crime of this nature.
And do we expect the defense to appeal this?
We do. I actually asked the defense attorney that today. He says that he is expecting to be the attorney handling that appeal. They only have 14 days to file, but he says he'll be doing that, and he plans to make essentially the same arguments that he made in court today. The big argument, other than the impact on the family and the acceptance of responsibility that this defense attorney is making, is that he says he believes the judge is finding some sort of guilt or holding Miguel Aguas-Vivas culpable in some way for his wife's murder, when really he says that he was not involved in the planning or the execution of that. In fact, had he been able to drive the money that day, then he would have been the one who was killed, according to his defense attorney. So the attorney is hoping on the appeal to win the appellate judge over for that point, that having an 84-month-long sentence for essentially serving as a mule is a bit strict, and it seems like he's being held culpable for that murder.
And the judge said today that it is likely that he is deported?
Yes, so he is from the Dominican Republic originally, and it seems